now no facts from this IG report. You've heard them.
We have
Who has been punished?
A set of facts in a preliminary report. Thank you, Ed. We got a report yesterday, and the president found the report extremely troubling.
I'm wondering if the president continues to have confidence in the secretary's ability to lead that department.
I think you saw the statement that I put out yesterday, reflecting that the president was extremely troubled by that preliminary report.
How does he conduct this investigation if he doesn't have the full confidence in the president?
The president looks forward to the preliminary review that he asked the secretary to provide to him.
Does he have confidence in Secretary Shinseki?
The president believes that, and is confident that Secretary Shinseki has served his nation admirably.
Charles, I want to broaden it out just a bit. There are obviously other news. The president got hammered for this West Point speech by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, by others. You have a number of foreign policy fronts where it does not look good for the U.S., and now you have the economy shrinking in the first quarter.
You put them all together, and you have a crisis of competence. This administration had a lot of ideological opponents, including me, many others, but it was mostly on their goals: radical, expanding the government, intruding into people's lives. So then you get to a point where you get three factors. As you say, the most important underlying all of it is the economy. The recession lasted 18 months. The so-called recovery has been on for 5 years. We now have a quarter of contraction. If you compare it with the Reagan recovery, the average for the 6 years after his recession was a growth of over 4%. Here it's between 1 and 2. So we have high unemployment, chronic sort of discontent, and that underlies everything. You add onto that the fiasco of Obamacare, self-inflicted. They can't even put a website together for $500 million. And then you add the VA crisis, which isn't only incompetence, but a kind of a venality, a whiff of corruption, sort of ignoring it, and there's a moral component. How can you, I mean, people can understand abusing the IRS for political and all that, but these are veterans. These are people everybody wants to honor and take care of. So add them all together, and Shinseki is a dead man. What you heard today was an invitation for a resignation.
Yes.
And I think he's gone by the weekend.
Charles, what's going right for the administration?
Well, the calendar is moving, only
slowly.
The sun rises in the east. They haven't screwed up that yet. 2 years to go. Look, this president is just hanging on. Normally, you have a rough 6th year, 7th year, because you're already a lame duck. And what you do, your domestic agenda generally is over, and you get active in the world, foreign affairs. And that's where the president had his shot, West Point, and he blew it. So I don't see a blue sky anywhere here.
Although the State Department spokeswoman said today, I would argue the president doesn't give himself enough credit on the foreign policy front.
Well, that's the worst part of all. But perhaps Juan ought to answer that question. I can never answer what's going right with the president. Perhaps Juan could.
Well, I think there's lots going on. I mean, you know, just a moment ago you said Obamacare. I mean, gee, I see Democrats now promoting Obamacare. Republicans trying to come up with their own answer to Obamacare. I see fewer people applying for unemployment in this country.
The question.
I know, but you know, I mean, you get so political at some point, being critic in chief. I mean, you hurt yourself. You hurt your credibility.
But how about the State Department spokeswoman saying he doesn't give himself enough credit? And pressed on it, she said, well, he needs to give himself credit for engagement on Iran and what we've done on Ukraine.
Well, you look at the results of the election in Ukraine, you have a pro-Western winner. And again, what you see is the Russians now, I think, you know, backpedaling in terms of their aggression in that area. So, but you know, it's, you know, at this point, it's so difficult to break through the static.
A Ukrainian Army helicopter was shot down today with 12 dead, including a general. The eastern part of the country is in civil war. Crimea is gone, and the country is in ruins. And you're telling me we have a successful policy in Ukraine?
I'm telling you, we just had an election, and we had a pro-Western candidate elected, and I'm telling you that Putin's aggression there is not what it was supposed to be. And that came from you, Charles.
Water rights are a state-recognized right in Washington state, as they are in many western states. It's very unclear what impacts this rule could have on the availability of individuals to exercise their water rights. Would those waters come under regulation of the Clean Water Act through EPA? The additional regulation that's going to be brought forth on small businesses like mine is unbearable.
Do you really think that we can rely on moral integrity of businesses to not pollute our nation's waters?
This is ludicrous. I mean, I don't think anybody in a straight face can say that this is anything but a huge grab of jurisdictional power at the end of the day. Not every dang small businessman has a lawyer in their pocket that they have on retainer that they can fight these things.
You know, are we going to trust moral authority of business not to pollute when it's to their advantage and when they can make a buck?
I mean, Charles, we're talking about, this is a letter from a number of lawmakers, ditches, drainages, ponds, natural and man-made, prairie potholes, and other occasionally or seasonally wet areas under federal control.
This is insane. One, this is not the Mississippi. This is water in a trench. This is the federal government coming on your property and regulating water in a trench. This is yet another example of the inexorable, inevitable, eternal expansion of regulatory bodies. This is not in the bill. This is something that Republicans and Democrats ought to make very clear in legislation is outside of the APA control. And it does crush small business. The big business, agribusiness, has all the lawyers it needs. It's the little guy who's crushed, and that's going to be the result of it.
This has been a Sunfish production.